Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Troy.
And I'm Ben-Jamin Toy.
We're broadcasting from the Cohesion Culture headquarters in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina, where even when it rains, the sun still shines.
You're going to hear real-time stories from leaders confessing their most crucial or recent uh-oh experiences in business.
Learn what their uh-oh cost them, steps they took to fix it, and how they planned
to not do that one again. All right. Welcome, listeners. We have with you John Spruill, a friend of mine from actually only a few months. I feel like I've gotten to know you quite well. We are part of a small group of entrepreneur business owners that meet. We share office space in the same building. And so we're so grateful to have you, John.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
This is the great thing about working on these and doing that we're allowed to. So we're going to get started with the question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. We love connections before content.
Yeah.
So before we get into the meat of an experience, we love to ask our guests a question just to get things rolling. And John, your question is, if you had any amount of money to spend in any way that you wanted on anything, what would you do?
I would have a large car collection. I'm a car guy, so I would have a fleet of cars and drive something different every day for a month.
Just for a month?
For a month. That's 30 cars. That would be good.
Oh, yeah. One car each for each day.
I would, you can get 365 different ones each day. No.
I'm not trying to
do much, right?
Too extreme in the ask.
Too extreme. There you go.
Yeah, but you had all the money in the world, so it didn't really matter, right? Spend it however you wanted.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So I'm always torn between, like, I love the fact, John, that you unembracingly said, I want to buy something for myself, because my initial reaction is I need to buy it for someone else. People listening to this are going to say, you selfish son of a whatever, you didn't pick something more for the world. Like, I want to buy world peace, which of course isn't going to happen. So I think that for myself, it's to take my family, all my family, blood relatives, connections there, on the most lavish vacation that we could ever take together and spend time creating memories. That's what I would do.
Awesome.
Can I change mine to world peace?
Yeah, world peace.
If we're doing beauty pageant answer, I'm going to say world peace.
I know it's a funny thing that you say that, because one of my favorite moments in Miss Congeniality, which was
she gives her answer.
She gives an answer, and everybody and the deadpans into the audience, and then she says, "And world peace."
And then they go crazy.
And they go crazy. Love that. Love that part. But okay. I'm sure that people listening to us may not even understand Miss Congeniality.
Well, 22, 23 years ago.
Right. But I say to people who don't know the references that we make, instead of saying I wasn't born yet, Google the darn thing. Look it up.
Yep, you can do that.
Okay, great.
So I was trying to go that route or figure things out. I'm like, even if you gave everybody money to live, I don't think we'd have world peace. They're still going to fight. If you gave everybody the things that they needed to live, they'd still find something to argue about. Right. So mine would probably be in the travel, or honestly, what I'd love to do is have the resources just to be able to actually dig wells with Water Mission. Like, I just want to be able to go do that and not take any of the donation money and just go travel and do all that kind of stuff. So, but with that's travel. Like, I'm going to get there, I'm going to go see others. And while I'm there, go see other things. Right.
Yeah, it's nice. So you build a little humanitarian.
A little bit. Yeah.
Right.
So,
yeah. So John, we didn't try to design our answers to make you feel bad. So
no, it seems like you did. So can I ask for more money in the wish, and then I'll do both of the things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's unlimited. So yeah, you can just say, okay, once you're bored after the first month, you have to do something else, right? I mean,
yeah.
That's good.
Okay. So
before we get into asking you to talk about your experience, give us a little background about you. Tell people a little bit about your identity. So who you are, and then you can wrap in some things about your role. But we really want to learn more about who you are as a person. And through that, we may just interject some things that you say, because we want to make sure that our listeners have a chance to capture these nuggets of information because this podcast is designed to help people learn. And we find that you can learn from your own mistakes, or you can learn from someone else's mistakes. Obviously, you learn from someone else. It actually could be a lot better for your pocketbook and better for your mentality long term. So tell us a little bit about John. We want to know about you, John.
Sure. I think probably most people expect the first response just to be, what do I do for a living, or how I got to that point? But maybe kind of backing up holistically, Christian father to a 7-year-old, married for 26 years to my bride from college. And then just tried to be kind of a good moral individual, kind of living a good life, and being a servant leader when I do leadership activities, as well as just kind of give back within the community and stuff. And then vocationally, I've always been in the engineering community. So I went to school for engineering, University of Maryland, grew up on the East Coast in Virginia. And then immediately after college, headed west with my bride, who was originally from California. And then I started in a small niche automaker called Celine. They did high performance Mustangs. It was a little boy's dream job. And I grew very quickly into leadership roles, moving from that to another startup, which was a remake of Celine called SMS, and then Techco for aftermarket parts. Moved into Tesla in early days. In 2009, was with Elon for about 10 years. After that, did some consulting and joined another EV startup to launch another product. And then another SaaS startup that I funded. And now I'm a kind of a serial entrepreneur in this kind of phase of life.
And you're doing something new right now, right? Aren't you?
Yeah.
It's a brand new project.
Yeah. So the new project is startup driven. So I've been in the automotive industry for 30 years. And so the driven is a little bit of a hat tip towards the automotive career. And so my passion is, having been in 5 different startups and kind of seeing the good, bad, and ugly, trying to make better, wiser, quicker, faster decisions from those lessons learned, and impart that wisdom into kind of new startup ventures. And so I've got roles that I'm looking at for business advisory or fractional leadership, as well as investing in new startup companies to try to provide seed capital to get to launch. I am an operation-minded individual. I don't really have a lot of joy in the journey. I'm very destination focused. So once we kind of have our vision, set that in place, put our goal post, I'm going to drive hard, not let anything stop me to get to that goal. And so kind of bringing products to the market through a product launch, kind of a GTM go-to-market strategy, is kind of where my wheelhouse is and where I'm spending my energies right now.
That's great. That's great. So I want to go back to something you said, just to make sure that our listeners can conceptually get it. When you say that to practice being a servant leader, what would be at least 2 or 3 characteristics that you would say embody a servant leader?
So, I mean, it's easy to kind of like lead from like a point of like, I'm the boss, I make the rules, everyone kind of follows in line. So I try to be very more like interested and outward focused on what the team health is. And so I'm very much a team centric team builder. So I've always had strong ecosystems within a team environment. And so you do that by having kind of more communal voices, getting a collective kind of buy-in, rather than a draconian, we are going to do this and you're going to get in line or get run over.
Yeah, really important, because that servant leadership concept comes from the transformative theories of leadership that really focus on leaders taking a position that says that they will focus on the needs of others first and then self. And so sometimes servant leadership, I think, may be misinterpreted by those who don't have the study or the background, thinking that maybe that servant leadership means I have to do all kinds of actions and activities that somebody tells me to do, and I'm going to just provide that. So, but it's really a mind stake and a mind shift and a mindset that says, I'm going to pay attention, like you said, team centric. I think that's a very good way of being able to do it. Say, being aware of what others are doing so that I can lead in that particular fashion, which really points toward emotional intelligence, that leaders who are able to discern that kind of information and then put things in place are really good emotional intelligent leaders. Kind of really all comes together. So it's really good.
And John, a conversation that we had a little while ago based on some articles that you've been writing. being in the startup space, a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners find themselves in leadership roles simply because of the nature of their position. They started, nobody else has the answers. They're going to figure that out. Or when there's more established companies, there's the positional leaders, right? Organizational leaders. We have a belief that everybody's a leader because you can learn from some, but there are organizational positions that have managerial titles and roles. But you found yourself a leader in startups. How did you transition that of still not having anybody to point to, but make things up as you went, having leaders that didn't really know or have answers because it was all new to everybody else? So how did you transition being the entrepreneur, right? Trying to it wasn't your show, but you kind of had your own little units to be a leader.
Yeah, that was a great question. And you kind of hit on it with the term intrapreneur. And so I found myself in the genesis of many kind of organizational constructs where I've been able to be given the vision, buy into the vision, and then deliver that vision with, all of the process plan, methodology, creating teams, growing, staffing, advising, working with finance and other cross-functional teams as well. So building out like a whole ecosystem underneath the umbrella or safety net of being in a corporate environment. So I'm getting a steady paycheck, because I'm in corporate America at a certain rung on the ladder, but I've been given enough freedom and opportunity and trust to help deliver on that vision. And of course, that only happens if you're performing, right? So some pretty high expectations, like here's the goalposts we'll get accomplished. We're going to either launch the product, yes or no, right? That's a very binary outcome. And so I've had the good fortune of being able to kind of have that proof of concept to operationalize a business unit underneath the umbrella of corporate America.
That's really great. All right, so let's get to the point of this podcast. So John, in preparation for today, we asked you to think about and to share an experience with us. What would you like to share?
The example I have is the single most expensive mistake I ever made in my career.
Okay.
And it goes back to days in Tesla. And when we launched the Model S program in 2012, we didn't have two nickels to rub together. So we did things in a very scrappy way with as least amount of spending as possible. Required us to do a lot of spend out of house at third-party test laboratories, travel over the country to get all the work done. I did a financial study after that to kind of evaluate how much time and energy and overall expense, travel and logistics, everything included, full soup to nuts kind of evaluation to kind of put together a business case proposal to the finance team and to leadership and through Elon about how we could pivot to developing in-house capabilities, still being scrappy, still trying to do it ourselves, still building our own labs and buying equipment and managing it and then running them ourselves. But I basically had a nut of how much money I spent before as an ROI business case of, hey, we're going to always spend this every single new launch program we do into infinity unless we can scrub that, buy an asset, build a lab, build an asset, build a lab, whatever the case may be if we were inventing or buying. And then that cost would go to near zero. There's always be operational expense. And so that kind of created a journey of trying to create all these business case justifications. And so the was in kind of the final phase of that evolution of kind of going from like, all right, we're doing a couple tests in-house to more tests, and the percentages kept going up, how much we could do in-house. And then we were at kind of like the near nexus kind of apex point of like all the stuff that we could do in-house. And there was a device called a crash sled. And so it's a device that basically is the inverse of a crash. You have a propulsion system with the occupants in the vehicle in a body and white structure, and then it reverses and it creates a pulse of what the crash looks like in an actual impact. It's a very expensive asset. It was one that we had to fly staff and equipment to Michigan. That was the one place we did all of our testing for this particular asset. And so it was on my hit list. It was one of those, someday I'll be able to bring this asset in-house. It was, like I said, the single most expensive asset we'd ever purchased. And so we shopped around to 3 different suppliers. There were 2 that were conventional suppliers that had, kind of the best and near best technology that was currently available. And then there was a 3rd supplier that had invented an entirely new system. And so being that Tesla is kind of an innovator as a company, given that safety had become a hallmark of the company and something that Elon really championed for consumer safety, for our consumers, we were like, okay, we were really intrigued by the opportunity of having this asset that was like double better than everything else that was on the market. But the risk was it had never been proven out. And so we had to kind of put into place some safeguards in order to kind of justify to ourselves that this could actually be brought to fruition. And so one of it was we did a pilot test on a small scale version. The company was actually located in France. So we did trials over in France with this half-size model. The trials were pretty good to meeting all the expectations we had, and then we gave a green light to go ahead. So this was in a season of insourcing all the testing leading up to Model 3 launch. And so we had to build concurrent all of these test labs and all the equipment as we were building out a whole new facility prior to a lot of those assets landing on shore. And so typically I always say, there's almost a 1-to-1 ratio for the expense of a test asset, like the test equipment, to the facility cost of actually putting it on the floor, building the building around it, putting a little control room right next to it, whatever the things you need to do for wiring and plumbing and all of that stuff with electrical. So kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. And so now we're talking about an asset that's $3 million. That's the single most expensive asset we'd ever purchased.
And I'm beginning to feel that this is going to be a little bit more than just an
yeah. It's going to be an oh crap.
It's an serious a bit. Okay, good. I know
it's a big we had built the facility, so we did our side. Again, investing into building out the facility, digging big pits, having a reaction mass, big concrete structure for this sled to react against, so that it didn't shake the whole building apart. And then the assets started to deliver on shore. And they started putting some things together. They were also, as another safeguard, they were building one for themselves and one for us. And so we had one of my team members based in France, co-located with them to try to help go through the final confirmation testing before they finished the build out in America, in California. And that did not go as planned. And it kept getting delayed. And then there was like a big accident that happened in France. Nobody was injured, but it could have been catastrophe with personal human costs involved. And so really kind of the wheel started to come off at that time. I had a facility sunk cost. There was nothing I could do with it. There was obviously repercussions that we could do with not continuing to pay for the asset. And then there's whole legal channels that got involved. But that's kind of the genesis for, I guess, the question. And then we can kind of go through some Q&A on the aftermath.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, okay, so you had this opportunity for a test, didn't go like it was supposed to. Certainly that's an experience with all the money that's there. Break it down to individuals, break it down to you. What was the part of it for you? So we saw what was happening, like you painted a great picture for the whole idea that it wasn't happening. But how about from you, the leader perspective? We want to make sure that the folks who are listening have an opportunity to hear their individual roles into experiences, even though they may not have been a full 100% contributor. There may have been something that they thought about later that they could have done differently to do that. So just speak on that level if you can for a minute and tell us, what you were experiencing on an individual leadership perspective for the
Yeah, I mean, I would say immediately there was a feeling of regret, right? Because I had these other 2 conventional test equipment suppliers that I could have gone with. There was always a case of like, was the timing or cost not right for those others? And those kind of walked us into making a bit of a leap of faith and kind of selecting this one asset that didn't really work out. So there was immediate regret of like, why did I risk or why did I gamble on an unknown technology when I really didn't need to have something so innovative, and just played it safe? So there was regret. There was, worry and fear, right? Because there's a very large financial toll. To that point, I had nothing but, successes and high fives with finance of building out these ROI business cases. All return on investments were really short duration, about a year. We would get the asset paid off. So it was high fives across the board with finance teams. So my track record was really good, but then this is a very expensive mistake. And so I always treated in that entrepreneur kind of like attitude, the money of the companies, I treated as if it were my own. So it felt like I fumbled the football for the company. So that was a personal, feeling of shame a bit. And so I was dealing with like the shame and the regret and the why did I risk so much kind of feelings at that time.
So what was the prompting or the motivation to actually take the risk when you didn't need to?
So the asset was proposing to be much more accurate, like the most accurate pulse, it's called. So the crash signature creates a pulse, like the G forces and everything that are involved in the crash, kind of how the human occupant would articulate during a crash would be 1-to-1 exact to what happens in an actual crash. And so that hadn't been done yet. And so the new technology was very exciting. And so again, going down that path of, hey, we're trying to be, safest car ever produced. I mean, still to this day, Tesla has produced the safest car ever tested on the government standards. And so it was in the same vein of that, but, again, I was risking more than I knew I was risking because I never had a failure like that prior and didn't really think that it would have not become successful. I didn't have that track record. And so maybe I was a little bit overconfident, and like, this will just be like all the rest, will get it done. But I'm not the supplier building the asset, and so I can't overcome their own internal issues.
Right. No, I think that's really great, that kind of the way you presented that, and really helped us to understand, because these emerging leaders that are listening for us today, they can be individuals who may already be highly skilled in acumen areas of leadership and expertise in their area, but we can all learn from each other. We can all learn something. But I also like to break it down for the individual who's just learning, who's really being passed over from promotion because maybe they're not confident enough, or maybe they take too many risks, or they don't do enough investigation for that. So I really appreciate you really being vulnerable and sharing, some of that information. Now that you had that experience, so because, and see if this makes sense, but if I have no caution to do something because I'm going to just try it, like, hey, I'm just going to try it, and I try it and I fail, my reaction to it the next time may be a little different. So tell me, what is your reaction now to maybe similar situations of you taking greater risk? How has that impacted your decision making?
Yeah, by measuring the risk, right? So what if it doesn't come out as you plan? And you can only control what you can control, right? And so, I'm on the buy side, on Tesla, we're buying an asset from a supplier. I can't do the work for them, right? And I'm not the innovative mind behind the concept that they came up with, right? It's unique intellectual property of their own. So you have to know like what you can control, what knobs can you turn, what are your safeguards? And it's not that like in everything you do, you're automatically going to have contingency planning for everything. But I think as you walk up the stair step of risk profile, you absolutely should think more and more heavily about contingency plans. And I would say my lesson learned is I just did not expect that it wouldn't have gone to fruition the way I had anticipated. And so given that was the single most expensive asset and it was a risk play because it never had been built before, it was a new invention, I didn't have a plan B.
Got it.
So ROI, you were planning on return on investment. Now we're going to say risk on investment in this sense. What did it cost you internally? Like not you personally money, but like as far as position, social capital within the organization, or were there any repercussions for you? Like what did it cost you to make this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was social capital for sure. There was a lot of spend during Model 3. You know, it was very publicly called and termed by Elon production hell. So there was a lot of spend that was trying to innovate Model 3, especially in the manufacturing line. There was a lot of wasted spend, right? Because it wasn't me, I guess, only taking those risks. The company across the board was doing that. And so they did have to regress quite a bit back into more conventional manufacturing practices. And so most of those results were, you know, leaders were getting fired, people were being held accountable, people were moving around different positions. You know, I didn't have the same consequence, but my social capital definitely lowered, certainly with the finance team. And then I had to be a burden to the legal team as well to kind of go after kind of like, hey, we need to claw back some of the money that's been paid out because this asset didn't come to fruition. We did have our sunk costs, obviously, with facilities that were just lost that we had to kind of pivot from.
And I'd like to really just focus in for just a second. I think Ben's going to have a follow-up question, but I want to talk about social capital. We've mentioned it now twice in this conversation. I want to make sure that the leaders who are listening to this understand this concept of social capital. So, you know, for me, it's about the relationship. It's relationships you develop. It's the trust that people have in you to make good decisions, to do what you need to do, and you build up a social bank, so to speak. And I always say to folks when they understand this concept, I go, your worst position ever is when you bankrupt your social capital, because it's so hard to replace it. It's so hard to build it. And when you mentioned that social capital, what was it like for you to rebuild the social capital, like with your accounting team or with your, you know, your other leadership within the organization, either peers or with Elon?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would maybe use that example of how, you know, it was almost like high fives all the time with the finance team because I was delivering successfully on those return on investment business cases. And to use maybe a more conventional analysis, it'd be analogous to going into a bank and shaking the hand of the banker and walking out with a loan to the amount that you wanted versus having to sit down, fill out an application, do a credit score, all of this, your justification of what your assets is. I'm going to co-sign the loan with somebody else that can back it up in case it. So as all that kind of went out the window. And so there was much more scrutiny for sure on the short term for future business cases to make sure we were kind of buttoned in and not taking such risk. So that's where I say the social capital was lowered because it wasn't as easy as just walking in, shaking the banker's hand and walking out with a duffel bag full of money.
So you mentioned managing the risk of future projects. How do you specifically do that though, when you're trying to still be innovative? Like what steps did you take to, or the actions to make sure you didn't do that again? Like, you know, how did you manage the risk specifically?
Yeah, I mean, we were in a season of doing a lot of invention of test equipment that we would largely make ourselves because it was more capital conservative to do so. Buying an asset off the shelf from somebody could be a large expense, and then we can maybe design it internally with our own engineering expertise and maybe half the cost. But there was also that same sort of potential consequence of we don't know what we know. We're trying to figure it out. It's our first time building and designing this equipment. And so our short-term lead time we expect ends up doubling because we didn't get it right the first time. And so I think in general, the pivot was to be more like equipment that was already kind of like tried and true. And so at that point, just because I had this own personal experience, I started encouraging the team to be less internally inventive and look at more assets that are already available off the shelf from known suppliers that were legitimate and we were already working with externally, and we've already seen that equipment work, and so let's buy that asset, as opposed to taking too big of risks of something that you know, unknown unknowns you find along the way, and then you don't get the right outcome you want.
Yeah, I think it's really an excellent point. It's sometimes not over-engineering what you can do. Take a look at what's already available out there that really has a good track record. And I know that, like from software, working in a financial institution and looking at our core processor, and oftentimes when we would want to add new features or functionality to the way we would engage with the consumer, oftentimes we would try to go out and look for the biggest, best, sort of most expensive thing, but only use 10% of it. But if we used what the core provided, we could use 80% of it, and it was already there, simplistic and already done. So I think it is sort of managing. I think what you presented was a very strong message that says, pay attention to what's available. You're not saying that you can't be creative. You're not saying, oh, I couldn't take a risk. You're saying, pay attention to what is available around me and see if we can use that. And will we get the result we need? Because we could potentially put it into action so much faster. And if we take an unknown and have to build it from the ground level or integrate it from the ground level. So I think that's great wisdom that individuals who are listening are thinking about that as they want to continue to exercise their leadership acumen.
John, you may not be able to speak on this one, but if you can, I'd like this to be an interesting take. Elon has been noted to have a very interesting take on IP, right? On the sense that he says, intellectual property patents are for the weak. He gives everything out for the public usage. And one example is how his battery technology was used by BMW and all this kind of stuff. And by letting others use it, it then allowed him to get the internal cost of batteries to be much lower. Did you see his leadership in that mindset affecting you guys and how you were able to utilize technology or being innovative by either by still inventing, but giving it away?
Yeah, I mean, internally, there wasn't a mindset of vertical integration, having internal capabilities to be able to have the control that we needed to meet schedule timing largely. But then Elon was also very direct in saying, hey, if there's a supplier out there that's doing it better than anyone else, and they're the best, benchmark out there, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. If we go and we look at the landscape and we don't find that there's a competent vendor that's either, let's say, use the assets we're talking about building for my team and testing, then that's when we would make the decision to develop it internally. So it would always be a case-by-case basis. I mean, so I wouldn't just say across the board, Tesla vertical integration of everything. It was based on can we do it better than supplier A, B, or C based on what their demonstrated experience is?
Yeah, it's really great. So one of the things we like to do as we move into our closing for our podcast is to kind of ask you to reflect back on, leadership in general. And if you had a mentee in front of you, someone that you were helping, and this particular person was sort of stuck in their job and they really wanted a different career, and you had the opportunity to help them. So this isn't a person that's inside your company that is looking to go outside. This is somebody you're working with already. So they're coming to you from the outside and they're talking with you, and you're going to give them some advice based on your experience. But what would you tell them to do to try to earn the career they want, not get stuck in the job they have?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I would say being observant of opportunities of leverage that can work in your advantage. And so I'm going to make 3 points. So progression happens quickest when there's corporate need, there's a stated desire of what you want, and thirdly, there's demonstrated experience of your track record. So when there's a corporate need of, hey, we're going to go in this direction, or this new idea, or hey, this pathway is a great opportunity for us, then there's a stated need by me to say, hey, I'm your guy or gal, right? I can do it. And then, by the way, here's this track record of my proof of ability to kind of perform to that level. When you have those all three alignment, change and progression happens very quickly.
Thank you for representing a proactive approach, because often individuals who are overlooked for positions are very reactionary in the way they approach their thinking and their communication and their interactions with their supervisor. And I love what you did is you said, let me observe what's going on around me. Let's identify the need and know that there is a desire to do it. And then I'm going to put forth some sort of recommendation, either in the area of here's some proof where it was already done, or some evidence that it could be something to follow. Great advice. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, John. We're going to end with another just get to personal question. So that was the business advice. Share with us your most memorable meal.
Most memorable meal.
meal?
Wow. Recently, here locally in Mount Pleasant, I went to Burton's and had Wagyu ribeye. First time I've had it. I didn't want it to be that much better than normal steak, but oh boy, was it better.
Dang it! Now I gotta like I've heard mixed ones like that it was the fat wasn't worth it and all that, but like I trust your opinion and I love ribeye, so like
it was almost like an ahi tuna, like that kind of like texture.
So
And again, you don't want it costs more money and it's better. You're like, oh, maybe that's not the case, but yeah, you could tell.
Wow.
What about you, Ben? What's your most memorable meal?
Okay, it's a toss-up. I'm gonna go with I was in Lake Nasser, Egypt, and we were there in Ramadan. Me and a group of guys, and we saw this island and a hotel resort at the end of the lake. We got a boat. We got over there. We told the boat guy to stay there. We go up. We say, hey, we would like to eat. He's like, do you have reservations? We're like, didn't know we needed them. He's like, we're a hotel. We only get the food that we have for our guests. It's Ramadan. We'll feed you in 45 minutes or an hour. So we wait. Comes back in 45 minutes saying, hey, we're out of food. Sorry. We go back down. Our boat driver was gone. So we had to go find a new boat guy. Find another resort on a peninsula of the same lake. Go up there, and the guy so it's after sunset, so the guys have eaten there. He said, we don't have any main food, but I can make you some food with whatever we have in the fridge. And we then sat in this basically open air rotunda that was low with the pillows, and just the meal was incredible with the incredible sky, the dark sky with stars over Lake Nasser, and it was just incredible. And then the next night we got to go to that first place, and I had stuffed pigeon. Very, very small meal apparently.
Yes.
It's not great. But overall, those two meals were just this incredible experience of adventure, of not knowing. Like we literally didn't eat till like 10 o'clock that first night or whatever. But it was such an incredible experience. Instead of and just having that memory to go with it in a very historic place.
Nice.
So, what you?
For me, so I have two meals. So I had to tie the two meals together because it's going to make sense. So John, like you, I'm a simple man of faith. Married my high school sweetheart in 1977, 2 children, 6 grandchildren. And when we were first married, we had very little. And so one of the meals I remember was just sharing peanut butter and jelly on the top of packing boxes as we were moving into our first home, and translate that to many anniversaries later. We had the opportunity to eat at the Jules Verne in the Eiffel Tower there in Paris, France.
Oh, wow.
So that was a great moment. It was just fine dining, all of this sort of atmosphere that you would really want to have to be memorable. It was our 35th wedding anniversary, and we were there. And so it was kind of a cool thing. So we've gone from peanut butter and jelly to food I can't even pronounce.
It's interesting how we answered that question, me by taste, as the way I interpreted the question, Ben-Jamin by travel and experience based on how he relates to things, and then you based on relationship. So same question, 3 different responses based on our own kind of like personal take on the question. I thought that was interesting.
It is. And thank you for pointing that out, because that's exactly what will happen with individuals who are listening to this. Not everyone is going to get exactly the same thing out of it. It is subject and open to interpretation. Yep. What we hope to do is to provide information that will guide them to being able to make better choices and decisions, so they no longer have to settle for being dissatisfied because they're working in a company that's not training or developing them, or they're being passed over for promotion. It's why the book Becoming a Cohesive Leader, The Power Up Guide to Grow, Develop, and Advance Your Career was such an important endeavor for us to put that information out there, to really take 2 different paths, mine of more of a corporate, formal sort of background, Ben from an entrepreneurial spirit, and bring them together to realize that you can get to leadership, even though you may have some different paths.
And I asked that question at a networking event recently, at a Chamber of Commerce event, because I like one of the connections before content, the beginning of this conversation. We're doing it now as well, but I love to do it in any of those networking experiences where when literally the first question sitting at this table, they're like, what do you do? So I was like, hey, I'd love to get to that question. Can we make it at least question 5 or 6? And then I ask these types of questions, because what they do is spawn the conversation. People remember the conversation, but your perception or what you picked up on this, John, was very interesting. To this note, there was a married couple that were both in the same business together, and the husband mentioned the dinner at his daughter's wedding, which was in France, and he talked about the cheesecake, not cheesecake, a cake with 3 tiers of cheese, right? And so, there was the money aspect, but it was him, the emotion of my daughter just got married. This is the meal, all this kind of stuff. And his wife gave that's what you thought of? Like she didn't have the same connection to that meal. She went to a boutique restaurant that only had 5 tables. That was him and her. So, relationship versus the other, it was a very interesting conversation that spurred all these other conversations that I don't think the rest of the table even got to give their answer. They just talked about different things. And so I love throwing those out there and just seeing what happens.
Yeah.
So.
Well, John, thank you so much for being a part of our podcast, helping us, really provide good leadership information to individuals who, whether or not they are really responsible for managing or leading people, or whether they're just trying to develop and lead themselves. That'll be great. So for you, is there contact information that you'd like to share with us? I should have asked you this ahead of time, but it's also the podcast. So if you say nope, I go and then we move on. But is there a way that if people wanted to connect with you, that they would be able to do that?
Yeah, I have a website. It's startup-driven.com. And then my email is john@startup-driven.com.
Super.
John with an H, if you're listening.
Yes.
Yes, John.
Yep.
Yeah, great, good. So for those of you who would like to reach Ben or I, you can get to us at info@cohesionculture.net. Now, we close out this podcast like we always close them out, because we are individuals who love learning and being a part of that. And so what we like to say is, you don't have to know everything. You just need to be teachable.
So thank you, guys.
Thank you.